Hey, Mike. Good morning.
Hey, Jackie, man. Hey, I got a missed call.
Yeah, I just called to let you know that I'm going to miss the 10 o'clock. My family is having a conference call with my grandmother's doctor. Where I sent an email with my updates to you and Mitch and Mary. But my grandmother's in stage 4 renal failure, so we're having to figure out what to do with her after she was in the hospital this weekend. So.
Oh, man, I don't have the, I'm going through something with a friend's mom, not much different. Yeah. Well, so, all right, are you out today or just?
No, I
do the cover?
No. I just have to be on this call at 10 o'clock with my family. I'm here. I'm just gonna miss the team meeting.
Okay, and if you don't make it to the 10:30, don't worry about it.
I should be there.
Okay, well, if you don't worry about it. If you don't make it to the 11:30, just text me so I know it's happening.
Okay, yeah, I that shouldn't be a problem. Yeah, I just.
Family's more important, you know. So just, if you need me to cover for you, just tell me what you need me to do. And we be good.
All right. Okay.
I mean, good luck. I'm sorry you're having to go through all this.
Yeah. Thanks. That's life.
All right. Talk to you soon.
All right. Bye.
All right. Bye.
Good morning, Ms. Swift.
Yes.
Hi, this is Jacqueline Luqman with Real Progressives. How are you?
I'm good. How are you?
Good. I'm waiting for Dr. Baraka to come online. Is he still available, or do we need to reschedule?
Yes,
Okay.
it was via phone, correct?
No, it's Google Hangout.
Oh, okay. Okay, I have to call him and let him know. I didn't know that it was Google Hangout. I thought it was over the phone, but I can set it up to Hangout.
Okay, I'm sorry for the confusion.
No problem. So I will have to call you right now.
Okay, thank you.
Okay.
Good morning, this is Jacqueline.
Good morning. This is Ajamu Baraka calling.
Good morning, Dr. Baraka. How are you?
Oh, I'm doing well. How about yourself?
I am great. I am really fabulous, especially since I have the opportunity to talk to you.
I'm honored to be with you this morning.
Well, thank you. So I had initially set this up as a Google Hangout.
Okay.
Is there any way that you can connect to, are you near a laptop?
I can get connected up, yes.
Oh,
Because she told me to just call in, so we're taking a minute or two. I don't have my laptop out right now.
okay, let me, all right, let me see what I can do here. I don't know what I just did. I'm sorry. I just did some. I'm not sure what I just did. Oh, here we are. Okay, that was me accidentally calling you on another line. Okay, so while I have you on the phone, let's just go ahead and have this discussion, because I appreciate you calling in, and I know that you have a very, very busy schedule, and we'll just try to do the best we can to get this information out to our supporters at Real Progressive. So we have a supporter base of probably, I think, about 89,000 people right now. And that's started with social media on Facebook. And that was, of course, in response to Bernie Sanders' campaign. And the person who started Real Progressives was Steve Grumbine. He had a political debate group on Facebook that was very popular, and he pulled a lot of people in to support basically putting information out about Sanders and his campaign and his platform that was not being conveyed in the regular media. So in a way, we became the alternate media that we knew that we needed. And we've grown past the Sanders campaign, obviously, to supporting the Green Party. What are your thoughts on the role of the media in American politics today?
Well, the role is critical. I mean, it actually, the corporate media has the ability. The corporate media has the ability to determine who gets exposure to the American people, and therefore whose message gets across, who can construct the narrative. So the corporate media becomes the gatekeeper. That's why we have to go around the corporate media. We have to utilize social media, the people's media, if you will, to the extent that it's still social, in order to get our message out, in order for us to be able to connect up and to engage the people. So that's what we've been trying to do with this campaign. It's unfortunate that the corporate media has a kind of function, especially since the media is not really committed to expanding the voices and the presence of political forces outside of the two-party system. But that's the reality we have to deal with today. So that's what we do.
So I have to give people who might not know what your record is, what your long history of activism is. I have to give them some background on you, because see, I know who you are, but a lot of progressives don't, because they have not been well exposed to the Green Party. So in a nutshell, from 2004 to 2011. You were the founding executive director of the U.S. Human Rights Network, a national network that grew to over 300 U.S.-based organization and 1,500 individual members. So could you explain to us what the U.S. Human Rights Network is and what it does?
Well, the network was and is a network of U.S.-based organizations, civil rights groups, human rights groups, community organizations that we pulled together into one network, grounding the network within the international human rights framework. These are organizations that, in particular the community-based ones, who begin to see and understand that the human rights framework was in fact relevant to their work. So we pulled those groups together in 2004. But what was different about this network was that this network was committed to applying international human rights standards to the U.S.
Mm-hmm.
Now, that's very important because people tend to think of the U.S., they tend to think of human rights violations as being things that happen outside of the U.S. But those of us who have been part of the human rights struggle, the human rights community for many years, I've always understood that the U.S. escaped scrutiny and it creates critical analysis because of that perception within the U.S. So this network was geared toward changing that and bringing the focus in on the U.S. and demanding of U.S. authorities accountability to international human rights standards, make an argument that had to be one standard for all states. So that was the thrust of our work. And in doing that, we educated organizations within the U.S. We advocated within human rights organizations and structures internationally, including the United Nations.
Mm-hmm.
We took the case to the international community regarding the ongoing human rights crisis we defined there was and is taking place in the U.S. And that work continues with the network even up until today.
So what ongoing human rights crises in the U.S. is the Human Rights Network bringing attention to that not just progressives, that a lot of Americans might not realize exist?
Well, what the network is doing is redefining the kinds of issues that most people know about,
mm-hmm.
And redefining those issues as human rights issues. For example, the war being waged against Black and poor people in this country by the police. That is seen as a domestic situation, a domestic legal situation, but actually it is a human rights issue. Mm-hmm. The fact that we have people who are denied their basic dignity regarding how they live materially in terms of the lack of housing, mm-hmm. Lack of affordable health care, being exposed to pollutants in the environment, having schools that are closing down and militarized schools. These are all human rights issues. So we redefine these issues within the human rights framework. The fact that we have 2.1 million people who are incarcerated, with half of those people being people of color. Mm-hmm. These are all human rights issues, and they represent, in our estimation, an ongoing crisis, especially from the fact that the authorities don't appear to have the political will or capacity to address these issues. So we have to then take those issues to the international community. As Malcolm said quite some time ago, we've got to take the U.S. to the Court of International Opinion, the World Court, if you will. So that's, in fact, what the network continues to do.
So that is an interesting point that you brought up about Malcolm's quote, saying that we need to bring the United States to the international court, these issues that we experience in the United States to the international court, because recently a piece of legislation was passed, I believe, through a congressional veto, the first congressional veto that has occurred in Barack Obama's 2 terms, to allow survivors of the September 11 tragedy to sue the government of Saudi Arabia for their role in the events that happened. And the reason the administration didn't want this legislation to be passed was because it would potentially open the United States up to the kind of litigation for the kinds of actions that we partake in other countries, that we are saying that we don't want other people to sue other countries for when their actions somehow affect us. That kind of international scrutiny has been something that the United States government has avoided for decades. And how do you see that changing on a larger scale with this action and with actions from organizations like the Human Rights Network?
Well, that's an interesting question. The U.S. has not really avoided completely international scrutiny and often and condemnation. It's just that information hasn't been exposed to the American people. But as you study the question, as you said, the fact that this was such an egregious example of a double standard when Barack Obama vetoed that legislation, that became obvious to everyone in this country that something rotten was in play here. Mm-hmm. That you had the U.S. state in the form of Barack Obama representing the executive that is attempting to try to shield the Saudi government and individuals in Saudi Arabia who may or may not have been connected to that horrendous event of 9/11. And so it exposed and raised the question as to what is really going on here and whose objective interest is in fact Barack Obama attempting to protect the American people or these powerful forces in Saudi Arabia. So it did help to raise some questions, but those questions have to be raised constantly and connected to other questions in order for people in the U.S. to begin to look at these issues in a different and more critical way. Right now, when we have these elections, the conversations around policies and what's important, they become so U.S.-centric. Right. We don't really talk enough about, the impact of American policies on the rest of the world. And that was one of the unfortunate things that happened during the primaries, that the issues around foreign policy didn't get the kind of attention that it needed. Therefore, the kinds of warmongering and aggression that we've heard from Hillary Clinton over the last few weeks in these debates were really the first time that people really had a chance to be exposed to and begin to think about and see Hillary Clinton differently in terms of her foreign policy stances. And people have been quite frightened, to be quite frank. So, these kind of links we have to continue to make. I mean, if you look at Hillary Clinton, if you look at her positions, you look at this veto by Barack Obama, it allows us to begin to raise questions with the people whose objective interests are really being represented by the Democrat Party and also, of course, by the Republicans.
Yeah, I'm glad you brought up Hillary Clinton's warmongering policies that many Americans do not know about, because for the most part, would you agree that Americans do not have a focus on international, on foreign policy? We don't have a firm grasp or even a real interest in international policies. That we're not internationalists. We seem to be very much nativists. We seem to be very focused on America only, America first, and America is the only thing that matters. And everything else that's going on in the world is irrelevant. That's how it seems to me. What are your views on the typical American view on international issues?
Well, I think the analysis is spot on, that we tend to be very U.S.-centric. And that's quite unfortunate. It is unfortunate because of the tremendous power that the U.S. state has and the fact that it is involved in situations globally. And that involvement is not always positive. In fact, most of the time, it is in fact negative. And so anyone who calls themselves politically literate in this country, they've got to have an understanding of the role of the U.S. globally. We can no longer afford to have this sort of nativist, this U.S.-centric perspective. We are part of a global community. We are so fundamentally interconnected now that it becomes not just innocence on the part of the U.S., but almost criminal that people in this country are not aware of our global connections and our responsibility morally and politically to be aware of the role of this government and be prepared to put constraints on this government when we need to do that as global citizens. So it is quite unfortunate and actually morally questionable for people in this country should be so disconnected from those realities, and except when the authorities want you to focus in on a particular question. Then your attention is shifted to Syria, or is shifted to the Russians, you know, and you're then subjected to the war propaganda, and because most people don't know anything about those situations, they then become so easily manipulated. So that now we have Hillary Clinton, you know, making noises about a no-fly zone in Syria, and people don't even understand the implications of that. And when you're talking about is placing the U.S. into a situation where there could be a direct confrontation with the Russians, this notion that the U.S. is innocent in Syria is absolute nonsense. You know, and while we are concerned about the very real humanitarian issue in Syria, no one can tell you about what is happening in Yemen with the U.S. ally involved in this barbaric bombing campaign of almost a year now in Yemen, and that humanitarian tragedy. So, you know, we've got to be much more sophisticated than what we are today, because in that we're going to continue to be manipulated by these two parties, and these parties have a bipartisan interest in keeping the American people politically illiterate. We've got to understand that.
Yeah, I really appreciate the emphasis on understanding not only our involvement in the international community, and the need for us all to be more politically sophisticated. I think for a lot of people, they are intimidated by learning more about foreign policy, because we're told in this country that foreign policy is a complex thing, and it's something that only the experts can really understand. And I don't believe that you have to have served on the board of Amnesty International, as you have, to understand that when our government tells us that this is what's happening in this country, our responsibility is to ask the very simple question, why? And that is something I believe that most people do not do. We just believe what we're told, and we don't ask basic questions. Well, why did this happen? Why did we feel we needed to get involved? Why weren't other measures? We don't ask why. And I think, go ahead.
You know, and you're absolutely right. I'm sorry to cut you off.
No.
I just want to jump in there because, you know, that your analysis is correct. But you know what? That phenomenon, I would argue, has only really developed over the last couple of decades. That, you know, that people used to raise critical questions regarding U.S. foreign policy. Those of us who lived, you know, through the 1960s remember how often the government lied to us, and that stayed with us for quite some time. But the state and the government has been able to reverse that, so that now people are less critical. So the propaganda is so much more effective when they decide to shift our attention somewhere, or to mobilize us to support some aggressive action in Iraq or wherever. So, and especially among Black people, there was a time that Black folks were always critical. We never drunk the Kool-Aid.
Right.
We heard things coming from the government. It was always suspicious. Now, one of the, I believe, and I argue, one of the detrimental consequences of the last 8 years of Barack Obama's administration is that kind of almost instinctual critical consciousness among Black people has been almost eliminated. So that now we are taking up the same kind of conservative worldview that we see reflected in the majority community. You know, and so we find ourselves, you know, taking up positions in support of the U.S. state that we would not have done 30 years ago. That to me is one of the morally questionable consequences of this administration and the ability of this administration to transform, if you will, the consciousness of not only the nation, but the consciousness of Black people specifically, into a consciousness that's more protective of the state, less critical, and in fact more conservative.
That is an excellent point, and I thank you so much for bringing that up, because I was thinking the other day, as my husband and I went to see The Birth of a Nation, and we have been probably revolutionaries, I guess, separately for several decades, and I think my mother was one, and she didn't even realize she was one, and she gave me quite an education on Black history and the different contributions and the experiences of particularly Black people, but also Native Americans and Latinos in our struggle for human dignity, equality, and justice in this country. And I've said to many people, because of our history, that their terror of Donald Trump is based on their lack of knowledge of what marginalized people have already been through. And because our media has done such a great job of minimizing that history of the terrorization of marginalized people by this government that has already occurred, that is occurring now, we have groups of people who are telling us that we should be afraid of Donald Trump too. But my response has been, well, we've seen Donald Trump before. He is nothing new to us. So your terror is the only thing that's new in this situation with Donald Trump. What are your thoughts? What are your thoughts on this whole Trump terror campaign, this Trump fear porn campaign that honestly I think both parties are using to continue to get Americans to stick in this duopoly that's killing us all?
You know, I'm listening to you, and I'm thinking I should step off the stick and let you take my place.
I have to remember that I'm supposed to be interviewing you. I'm trying not to have a conversation. Okay, go ahead.
No, you laid it out. That is absolutely that is the position. You know, it's like this is not new to us. We have seen, and I like how I'm gonna have to use that. I'm gonna give you, I'm gonna cite you, but we have seen Donald Trump over and over again. Mm-hmm. Now, there's no question that the conditions, the historical conditions are unique at this point, because one of the things that Donald Trump and Trumpism has revealed is, or exposed, is a more crude form of white supremacy. Mm-hmm. You know, the Republicans and others, you know, they use the code words, but we always knew what the underlying message was. But what Trump has done is to remove that nicety, and now he is moving toward the normalization of that kind of crude white supremacy. Mm-hmm. That is in fact dangerous. But you know, we come out of a tradition. Not only are we internationalists, you know, I'm talking about the Black radical tradition, mm-hmm. but we come out of a tradition of fighting, of resistance. Right. And we're not afraid of no Donald Trump. What we have to be doing right now is building real alternative popular power. Mm-hmm. And we've got to draw the line in the sand and begin to do that, because we have people on the Republican side that they have in that queue who are actually more dangerous than Donald Trump. Yes. Donald Trump is not really that dangerous in the sense that, you know, all the crude and bombastic language he uses, he's not going to be able to implement anything, mm-hmm. even if he was to win. Mm-hmm. Let me share with you why I think that's the case.
Please do.
Because the significant elements of the ruling class that supported the Republican Party have abandoned his candidacy and have moved over to the Democrat Party side, because he has no real support within his ranks, even within the congressional Republicans. He may win the office, but he will be so fundamentally weakened. Secondly, there still is the element of the people, and the people do exist. Mm-hmm. And, you know, the executive is not a dictatorship yet, but the combination of his weakened political state and resistance from the people, he's not going to be able to accomplish anything. Okay.
Exactly.
Third, we know as oppressed people, we're going to have to struggle no matter who wins.
Say that
the only
again.
Question for us is, the only question for us is where will our potential allies be? And under a Clinton administration, what we know is our potential allies are going to be basically quiet because they're going to be back under the protective umbrella of the Democrat Party, playing those insider games while we are still left in the streets trying to resist the terrible conditions our people still face. So we're not afraid of Donald Trump. We understand we've got to struggle regardless of who wins. And so, this whole thing about fear and scared of one person after 300 some years in this country, it is mind-boggling. It's like, who are these people? and who do they think we are?
Yeah, yes. And I'm always amused when I hear Black people repeat the Trump fear porn. Oh, he's going to make life so much worse for us. How is he going to do better at making life worse for us than everyone else who came before us? That's mind-boggling to me. But I want to ask you about what you said about something you said in your response to the vice presidential debate. We did an analysis of that. We had to watch it, and it was painful. But your comments were so refreshing and so inspiring. And one particular thing you said really struck a chord with me. And I would like for you to expound on that. You said that resistance is a human right. Explain what you mean by that, please.
Just in terms of a international political morality, the practice has been that any oppressed people who engage in resistance, that resistance is recognized as a fundamental expression of their collective human rights. But that everyone, every individual, every collective has a right to resist oppression. And that needs to be recognized. And that recognized and understood. So that when we have resistance that takes certain forms, you can't condemn the resistance because it takes a form that you may not agree with necessarily. The fact of the matter is that conditions will spur resistance. And if you believe in justice, if you believe in international morality, then you have to support that. So when Barack Obama and many members of the Black leadership class condemned the resistors in Baltimore, condemned them as thugs and criminals, they got to be called out. They've got to be called out. Because if they're not called out, then what happens is what in fact happened in Baltimore, that once our attention is shifted someplace else, the federal government, the same federal government that has failed to indict for just one of these killer cops, they come into Baltimore and use the full weight of the federal government to prosecute our young folks.
Yes.
They put in prison with these long, draconian prison sentences, 8 years, 12 years. Young folks who just engage in simple resistance kinds of activities. Somebody stuck a hole in one of the holes of the fire department. He gets like 12 years.
Right.
Smashing some vehicles. It was incredible, but nobody seemed to be outraged by that. Right. So, when you criminalize folks, and that's what when Barack Obama calls them criminals, he criminalized them.
Yes.
Then you undermine and you remove their potential support base, and that in fact is what happens. So no, we have to change that perception. We've got to stand with folks who engage in resistance, and not be concerned about the condemnation that might come at us as a consequence of that. You have a right to resist. And that's been a principle that we've seen in our support for liberation struggles throughout the world, and it should not be any different for us here in the U.S.
So I know that you have another engagement, and I do not want to monopolize your time. As much as I do want to monopolize your time, I'm not going to do that. Tell us what we progressives should continue to do. What are the best next steps for us in realizing the galvanization of this alternative power base for the people. Is this election the springboard? Is it, what should we do after this election? What should we be doing at the local levels and in our communities to make this this power base for the people, to transform a government into one that actually represents us? What should we be doing on those levels?
Excellent question, because the contained in your question is actually the beginning of the answer. That is that this campaign, and for example, this part of a process that is important for us for folks to vote for the Green Party, because we definitely want to reach that threshold of at least 5% or more. Mm-hmm. So that next time around we can avoid having to go through this process of getting ballot access, like automatic ballot access. Mm-hmm. And we will have some public resources so we can at least wage a more effective fight. Okay? But beyond that, this is not just about voting on November 8th. This is, in fact, as you said in your question, about building alternative, independent political power. So it means that we've got to continue to build this apparatus of the Green Party. And then we say that because the Green Party apparatus has to be linked up to the emerging and ongoing social movements. So that those social movements, if they want to compete in the electoral system as part of a broader strategy, then there's an instrument for them to, in fact, do that. We're not suggesting that the Green Party is the movement. We're saying that we want to develop this instrument so that people, if they think is worthy, valuable, it could be utilized. So we've got to do that. Secondly, though, what's more important is we've got to continue to build social movements. We got to continue to organize, because we're involved in a protracted struggle for transformation. Mm-hmm. And therefore, we've got to have the structures and the institutions to be able to raise that struggle effectively, because the state also recognizes that it is in a struggle, and they recognize even more so than we do, I think, that in many ways their time is just about up. But they are prepared to do what they need to do in order to maintain their hegemony. And so we've got to understand that the time is up for the system. Mm-hmm. It is already in its death throes, and we've got to recognize that and be prepared to struggle. So that preparation requires organization, requires building structures, institutions. It requires political education. So we say stay active, build your organizations, help build this Green Party apparatus, and not be afraid. And to the extent that you can, support the Green Party apparatus as an instrument if you think it's something of value.
Thank you so much for your wisdom and definitely for your time this morning. I know your schedule is packed, and we certainly hope that we'll be able to talk to you again. And we are absolutely very strong supporters of the Green Party of Dr. Jill Stein and Dr. Ajamu Baraka. Real progressives, you've got to check these people out. They are the real deal, and they are truly fighting for the freedom and the liberation and equality and justice for all Americans. And if we do not get behind politicians who espouse those kinds of parties, then I kind of feel like we deserve what we get.
Okay, well, let's do this again.
Yes.
Before the election, if possible. But secondly, I want to alert everybody that we're going to be doing this C-SPAN town hall meeting this evening.
Oh, great.
And so please get the information for that and join us if you can. So that's this evening, I think, beginning at, I think it's either 8 or 9.
Great.
But check it out.
Yes, we certainly will. Dr. Baraka, thank you so much for your time this morning. We appreciate you calling in, and we certainly hope to be able to speak to you again. Thank you very much.
Thank you.